I have to talk about Boba Fett. This is an unplanned episode. I kind of just did this last minute, but I watched the finale of the Book of Boba Fett, the latest Star Wars series on Disney Plus. I watched it a little late. It came out on Wednesdays. So much nicer than the old days when you had to record things or be there live. So this review will contain some spoilers, so if you don't want the spoilers for the finale, don't watch it. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Bookmark it and watch it later. Anyway, if you had been watching The Mandalorian, you know that's where Boba Fett made his comeback. He was a side character, and there were some definite questions about how he got to where he was in this situation, and this series answers all of that. This series is similar to The Mandalorian in its production model. Of course, it looks gorgeous. It's filmed in full 4K, fine detail. The music is by the same composer. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his name because I've only read it, never heard it from what I can remember. And I'm too lazy to look it up right now. But the music is great. It's epic and outside of the box, and very catchy. Boba Fett is no less. It's just like The Mandalorian had a great theme, this has a great theme of its own. And both of these series, Mandalorian and Boba Fett, really were in recent years viewed as kind of impossible budget-wise, production value-wise. And yet here we are. They make use of the soundstage with the large video screens, computer animation such as the Hutt family, which make appearances in the show, is better than the state-of-the-art animation from theatrical releases not too long ago. But this is what George Lucas was aiming for longer than that. He talked about this for a long time. There was going to be a different show that was, this was before the streaming days, so it was aiming for television, but back then the question remained, how would they accomplish this? He had ideas about rendering computer animation on the fly and motion capture. So in a sense, this is kind of the realization of what he wanted to do for years. Make these high production value TV shows that had the quality of movies. So anyway, the Book of Boba Fett, it covers events before his appearance on The Mandalorian and after. It manages the before by having him heal in the Bacta tank, and his dreams show how he got to where he was. Before, Boba Fett was really a popular character when he was just a side minion in Return of the Jedi. He died rather unceremoniously, falling into the Sarlacc pit and was presumed dead. So obviously he does escape from that, and he has what look like burns from stomach acid on his head and face. He is captured by the Sand People, but in a turn of events, they end up learning from each other. Um, they teach him about survival and fighting technique, and he teaches them things like how to drive speeder bikes. And by the end of his sojourn in their territory, they make him an honorary sand person. He goes through the whole ceremony and everything. And when we first see him in The Mandalorian, that's why he knows how to fight using a staff, like the Sand People do. Also, Fennec Shand comes back. You might remember her from The Mandalorian as well. In that show, where she was also presumed dead from being shot, there was a brief shot of Boba Fett's boots walking up when he supposedly saved her. And it wasn't explicitly stated, but that was speculated that that's who it was. And they have a nice dynamic together. She is, of course, cynical at first. Then she helps him in jobs. And then eventually she, even when she has the chance to go, she wants to stay, even after her life debt is paid. There's plenty of treats throughout the series. Little details and big details and references and things like that. They get a new Rancor. Of course, you know, the Rancor from Return of the Jedi died out of necessity to save Luke's life. But they get a new one, and the Rancor imprints on Boba Fett. It's the first person he sees. And that ends up paying off in the finale when Boba Fett gets to ride through the town in a pretty awesome extended scene. And speaking of which, when Boba meets this Rancor, he makes a passing comment. I'm not sure if everybody noticed it, but it's a reference to the Star Wars Holiday Special. He says, "I've ridden Beast 10 times its size." And if you've seen the Holiday Special, you know instantly what I'm talking about. That was part of the cartoon segment. It was actually Boba Fett's very first on-screen appearance before The Empire Strikes Back, from the first Star Wars sequel, actually, where Boba Fett rode this other huge beast. Now, there was a little side quest in this series that went back to The Mandalorian. One episode was all about him and where he was now, after he had already given Grogu to Luke Skywalker to be trained as a Jedi. Now, some might not like this or disagree, saying that, this is Boba Fett's series, why go back to The Mandalorian? But I think this was a good idea. One reason is that The Mandalorian is one of the many friends that Boba Fett made in these recent days to help in his battle on Tatooine, and he's one of the ones that came back to help. And considering the dramatic ending of Season 2 of The Mandalorian, you can't just have him show up without any addressing of what is going on currently. That has to be addressed first before you can move on. So this put things nicely in place for him and for Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, so that they could participate in the action at the end with Boba Fett. And also, at the end, it pretty much set them up for Season 3 of The Mandalorian, which will be coming at some point. So that basically is really what it did. It got them back together. It got a new vehicle because the Razor Crest was destroyed in Season 2, so it got everything lined up for Season 3 of The Mandalorian, and that was kind of essential. And regardless, the focus of the whole season, the broad focus, was still Boba Fett. Oh, and by the way, when Luke Skywalker makes his next appearance, it's better than his appearance on The Mandalorian, technically speaking. In his first appearance, they used masking with de-aging, and it looked fine. To me, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the story, and using other elements to tell the story. That works for me. I have an imagination. That doesn't bother me at all. But I'm just saying it did get noticeably better. So the first version, the masking with de-aging, his face looks a little bit too big compared to the size of his head, and it's like floating over top of it. But this one was so much more natural. They used artificial intelligence technology, which pulled from a library of all the angles of his faces from video and audio recordings of him speaking when he was young, like from the radio dramas of Star Wars and other things. And they were able to feed that into the computer and create this whole performance from that, which is amazing. And it looked so much better and more natural. And it's great how technology is progressing so much to allow this to tell stories now that from people who will be long gone. Not just tell the stories like in a book or something, but in a accessible, broadly appealing, visually stimulating way. So when Boba Fett initially assassinated Bib Fortuna, who had taken over from Jabba and become almost just as obese as him, it wasn't clear what his intentions were, not entirely. Was he just going to be the new crime boss? Was he just going to continue this terrible cycle that this planet is enduring? No. The flashbacks really put that into perspective and how much he's kind of changed. He used to be amoral, gun for hire, basically, and now he has a purpose and principles. I mean, where would he get those principles from before? I mean, he was raised by Jango Fett, who also didn't have too many principles, except for self-preservation and this one clone that he decided to take on as a son. But when they show Boba Fett coming out, blasting his way, reaching out from the liquid of the Sarlacc pit, it's kind of like a rebirth in a sense. He was reborn. So yes, he assassinated Bib Fortuna, took over the throne, even started going along with some of the local protocols. But his intent was to clean up the town. So yeah, it's kind of like a Western in that sense. There's crime syndicates that people live in fear of. There's regular drug trafficking that they have to be aware of. Drug runners, they call it spice. There's implied prostitution, gambling, of course, all those things go together with organized crime typically. Even small time gangs of biker thugs that would terrorize the local farmers. But Boba Fett steadily begins taking over and taking out the trash. He starts making this apparent that things are going to be different now by taking off his helmet, walking through town, getting to meet people, and he wants to rule through respect, not through dreaded fear or threats like the previous rulers. I mean, not that that doesn't have a place for certain types of people, but for the general populace, the innocent victims. And speaking of westerns, yes, Cad Bane shows up. Cad Bane from the Clone Wars cartoons and other series. Pretty old by now, still wears his cowboy hat. Appearing for the first time in live action. I believe the same voiceover artist, but they didn't alter his voice to be like the cartoon, unfortunately. That would have taken just a little extra filter, a little extra step to give it that unusual timbre, but oh well, it was close enough. So this series as a whole is just a really good character development and expansion and closure in a sense for the Boba Fett character. Because of course in the prequels you see him as a little boy that's just along for the ride, doesn't really know what's going on, and then his father gets beheaded and he goes over and takes his helmet and is grieving obviously. And then in the Clone Wars, as he's growing up, he gets caught up in various things and wants to get revenge. And on an interesting note, since he was the first unaltered clone, another alternate name for him was Alpha. And interestingly, the last member of the Bad Batch, which was another Disney Plus series of the genetically off clones, one that ended up as a girl, her name was Omega. So that's just an interesting side note. And going back to Cad Bane, he had trained Boba Fett at times when he was growing up, but he wasn't a nice guy. This is a cruel guy who doesn't care for anyone but himself. So his Boba Fett comes full circle here. He confronts Cad Bane again, who comes into town like the old black-hatted cowboy. Boba Fett says, "Don't toy with me. I'm not a little boy anymore." But of course, Cad Bane does try to do that. He says, "You tried to go straight. You've got your father's blood pumping through your veins." So he's playing on his insecurities like a little devil on his shoulder, and then injects his own philosophy that Boba has now rejected, and says, "Look out for yourself. Anything else is weakness." And of course, Boba turns the tables on that. Of course, this is Star Wars we're talking about, so people survive. People have been known to survive death in various ways. But for all intents and purposes, as far as I can tell, Cad Bane is gone. So yeah, this has a happy ending. Mandalorian and Grogu are set up for their next season. The town is cleaned up. Boba Fett and Fennec Shand still working together, have a friendly relationship with the townsfolk. And then, a pleasant surprise during the end credits, that beautiful music I was telling you about, the theme song, they slightly alter it. It's an instrumental that also uses a men's voice choir. They don't sing real words. Their voices are basically used as just another one of the instruments. But in the end credits of the finale version, a couple of those sounds are now emphasized, and you see that all along they were really saying Boba Fett. Yes, those are the actual lyrics of this music. First I thought, no way, I didn't notice that all this time. So I went back and listened, and no, that's the way it was. It was subdued before, but now it's emphasized. They're actually saying Boba Fett. It's just a really cool, catchy song. I even did a karaoke version of it if you want to check that out. So yeah, I give this one top marks. Especially if you like the saga as a whole, the prequels included. This is a really nice bookend to Boba Fett's story. Makes it all better. Great acting, character development, pleasant surprises. Good show. You can binge it right now on Disney Plus. All right, I'll see you next time.